This video is part of my Google Analytics workshop. So if you are interested to learn more about Google Analytics, then make sure to subscribe to this channel. You also have a link in the description of this video, which will take you to a page where you will find tons of digital analytics and Google Analytics resources. So make sure to check that out as well. Now let's dive into the video.
So what happens in Google Analytics is user comes to your site. You place a small JavaScript code on your website. This JavaScript collects the information when the user visits. It does not connect any other data to identify user as personally. So I do not know who this person is, but I know user ID 123 is doing these things. Now you can create other stuff. You can implement the solution in a way so that you know who this person is. I can exactly tell who this person is by combining other data sources. But by default, it does not collect information. It gives every user a random number, which is done by a cookie. So anonymous cookie gets dropped. This cookie collects the assigns an ID, and every time the user comes back to your site, that cookie is read and it knows who this person is. If your site, your app requires users to log in, then definitely you can use that information. But you cannot pass any personally identifiable information, PII, over to Google Analytics. That's against their terms and conditions. So you can't do that. Google Analytics does not collect any data that can identify a user personally. You can't pass it. This is a big thing. If you do pass even email address, name, your Google Analytics account will be removed. So anonymous cookie then pass this JavaScript, drops this cookie, collects the information, sends it to Google Analytics database, where then all the data after collection is compiled into the reports. So you can then use these reports to perform in-depth analysis to understand and then drive those insights. To track a site, you create a Google Analytics account. I'm going to go through those steps, add a small piece of JavaScript. And then here is how you get the tracking code. Now, I mentioned there are two types of Google Analytics available today. One is free version, this is called Universal Analytics, which is the old version of Google Analytics. Or I have a hesitation in saying old because it's the most prominent existing Google Analytics available today. Most of the sites use that. Last year in October, Google Analytics pushed out a new version called Google Analytics 4. They released that product in a haste. I think they had to hit some quota or some kind of internal benchmarks to saying how many people are using that product. It was kind of half-baked, got released, and they forced people to use that product. Now, when you go to Google Analytics and create a new Google Analytics property, by default, it creates Google Analytics 4 property, not old Google Analytics. However, there is a hidden way to create those, and I'll show you how that's done, because most of the companies understand old analytics. All the articles, blog posts on the web, YouTube videos, whichever you're using to learn, are referring to most of the time old or existing Google Analytics, which is called Universal Analytics. Place this code in the head section of each page. Right after the opening head, every time a user visits, this page collects information. Now, I do not suggest doing this, even though that's how they place it. That's how it's done in most of the time. I suggest using a tag manager solution called Google Tag Manager, which allows you to decouple the tag, the page code, and the tags that you're putting. So rather than putting Google Analytics directly on your website, you're putting a tag manager code and then managing all your tag, whether it's Facebook Pixel, whether it's Google Ads conversion, Hotjar you're using, any heat mapping, other heat mapping tools you're using, any other conversion tracking you're using, they can go in your tag manager. You can easily remove, configure everything within a tag manager. Not going to go into details in tag manager here, because that can take another 6 or 7 hours to go through the whole thing. But if you're not familiar, again, the plug is I do this session where I teach these things in 5 easy steps how you can get started. You can learn there, or you can just go to YouTube and find some training. Tracking collects when this tracking code is placed. It's tracking not only user, but it's collecting information like language the browser is set to. So EN, US, EN, UK, those kind of things. It just collects what your language is, the device and operating system that you're using. So are people using iPhone? Are they using Android? What kind of browser they're using? All that information is collected automatically. Then traffic sources such as search engines, ads they click on, social media, email, etc. All this information with some tweaks can be passed over to Google Analytics. Data in Google Analytics is not limited to just website, mobile application, website. You can even have point of sale system, online and offline both. You can pass that data. You can pass like video game console, CRM system, any kind of data that you can think makes sense for you to analyze, you can collect. By default, it's on web and mobile, but you can bring in other data sources as well. That's where the power really starts to come into play, is more than just on-site. You're now bringing other sources to understand what's happening. So here's a session. Session, basically you'll read, hey, user session starts, etc. The tracking code collects users activity. On every page, Google Analytics group all your activities into a session. Session is like a visit. When you go to a physical store, you go in, session starts, you browse around, you look at different products, you spend certain time, and you come out. Session ends at that point. The only thing here is if you go back, the new session doesn't start unless there is a gap of 30 minutes between your visits. So every time a user comes, a session starts, but it requires 30 minutes of inactivity to be counted as a new session. So if you come out and go back, come out and go back, you're still in the same session. Okay, we went through this. Tracking code collects the information, Google Analytics processes, aggregates it, and organizes. And you can do certain configuration settings to allow you to get the required data in the way you want the data to be. Keep in mind, once analytics processes the data, it's stored in a database where it can't be changed. So you have to first think about what you want to collect and how you want to collect. Because once you make the changes, you can't go back. One of the most common problems I see with organizations, they start collecting the data without giving thoughts on what needs to be done. That's fine when you're starting out, but as your maturity in terms of data usage goes, you have to figure out what do we want to collect, how do we want to collect? Because there are so many different ways you can configure the tool, you can get the data. But most of the sites will just do basic tracking, which is fine. Once you learn, then you can do other stuff.
Want to learn more about Google Analytics and Google Analytics 4? Then check out Optizent Academy. The link for the site is in the description of this video. Make sure to like this video and hit the subscribe button so that you can continue to learn from these free videos. Thank you.